Yo, what's poppin'? So, doing a video for one thing that every single team did wrong in the Midseason Madness qualifiers or tournament, in a random order because I'm tired of doing things in alphabetical or in East-West or whatever. So I'm starting with the New York Excelsior. So, New York, they took way too long to actually get onto the double flex support. They didn't really get that going until against Dallas, really, and at that point, you've already played half your matches. It's just too little too late, and it boggles my mind that they never got Game Ninja onto his characters before now. Like it just that's his guys, that's his characters. That's kind of why you like have him, right? That's why you have two flex supports, three flex supports now in your roster. Uh, I don't know how you don't put him on it until you've played 3 games until 2 weeks in. Doesn't make any sense. Next, going to the Guangzhou Charge. So biggest mistake was they didn't promote their academy team early enough, and the whole team was just wrong. This is a team that is very hard to say because they were so bad consistently. There was consistency issues. There was over reliance on choice A1, and this whole team was wrong, to be honest. And it looks maybe they fixed it. We'll see. Next is the London Spitfire. So London, they relied too much on Rush until they didn't play it. Like relying so much on the Rush wasn't the problem. It won them 5 out of 6 regular season games, right? And they still played the dive in there. Don't get me wrong, they still played the dive when they had to, but they didn't play the Rush as much as you would have liked in this tournament, right? Uh, you beat Atlanta with it, but then it's not played. It's like 50-50 on chalk, and I think they've played Rush more than I think they played Dive more than they played Rush against Florida. So maybe I feel like they've scrimmed the Rush the most, so they should be the best on it, and they are the best on it. And they kind of didn't play it as much. Maybe they didn't have the opportunity with the maps or whatever, but I feel like they could have made it happen. Um, and because of that, whenever Sparker gets shut down in the dive, they kind of struggle because that's their only tool. That's their only tool in the dive. Really, is Sparker going crazy. So yeah. Next up is the Chengdu Hunters. So Chengdu, it's going to be this the entire time, the entire season, right? It's the inflexibility whenever you have the Jimmu leave DPS line. That's it. You can point out as many different things as you want. You can point out, oh, Gaga can only play Winston and Ball. But it's like that's all you need, really. Like, what else do you really need? Uh, I don't know. It's always going to come back to inflexibility, no matter what stage, no matter what's going to happen. And Jimmu did look good on the Tracer. He did get better on the Tracer, but he's still not matching up to your propers, to your zests, to your profits, uh, or your alpha Y's even. Right? He's not there, but decent look. Next up is the Shanghai Dragon. Shanghai have a problem that I just said Chengdu didn't have a problem. They can only play the ball mostly, or the Winston, right? And I said that's all you need for Chengdu, but for Shanghai, because of their inability to function as a roster with Void in, you're forced into Fate, and even their Circuit Royales don't look that good, other than lip fragging. It's just all lip, right? Um, as a team, lip was the only one that showed up oftentimes, and they just can't. This team is not a team without Fate in the lineup, and it's quite sad. Moving on to Atlanta. So Atlanta, they placed third, right? It's hard to nitpick things. So what I'm going to go with is that Speedly was still 17, and he's not going to be 18 until like 2 weeks into or 3 weeks until the third week of next stage. So that's the biggest thing. Speedly is too young. That's the biggest problem. Next up, they ran into London in a bracket. That's the most. That's what you can really go to because let's say they beat London in this bracket, right? Then they play here. Do they beat Chalk? Maybe. We'll never know if they were going to beat Chalk. They didn't play. They could have beat Chalk. Atlanta has a habit of sending Chalk to the lower bracket, right? It's happened. Um, from there, does it make them not place third? Maybe. Maybe they get second, right? So if London's not their kryptonite, if they figure out how to beat London, maybe that's a second place instead of a third place. Next up is the LA Gladiators. This is where the real nitpick stuff comes in because they won, right? How are you going to criticize the team that won? Well, what I have to go with here is Ons did not play at peak Ons performance. He did at the end. No, he did at the end for sure. He was in the semifinals. He was in the grand finals. Don't for sure. But until then, he was not. that guy, right? And that's to be expected, right? You're getting split playtime. You're not what you used to be, whatever. But if I have to say something with the Gladiators, it has to be that. Or you can argue maybe Potafon had some off games too. It has to be that secondary DPS besides Kevster. If you have to choose something on the Gladiators, that's what it has to be. Um, yeah. Next is the Boston Uprising. Sigma May Rush. Think about it. Consider it. See that it's awful. Never run it again. They did understand that towards the end of the final like 2 matches. At that point, it's too late. You've already thrown away multiple maps by playing it. Just stop. Just stop. Okay, and they did it. Happy for them that they did that. Too little, too late. I got nothing. Um, Next is the Philadelphia Fusion. So the biggest thing with Philly, right? Their DPS just didn't show up, right? They beat the Spark that same day. 2 hours later, they're not there. The DPS have gone. They've used all their energy. It's not there. Um, so Philly, they're going to continue to ride or die on the DPS line in Bellisria, and whenever they don't show up like they did against Atlanta, it looks really bad. And Philly did not look like the fourth best team in this tournament. I think that goes to Spark, even though they beat Spark. Whatever. I don't think Philly looked like the fourth place team. Or if you argue they did, there's a huge gap between third and fourth, right? Uh, and I don't know. That's just it. That's just it. The consistency issues from the DPS. Maybe you can say, oh, they play 2 games in a day, so they're tired. But Gladiators won by doing that, so who cares? And so did Seoul the previous stage. Speaking of Seoul, I'm not going to them. I'm going to the Toronto Defiant. Um, so the thing with Toronto is if Hisu's not the best player in the lobby, they're going to lose the game every time. Uh, they go up against Houston. Merritt diffs him. Toronto, it's close. It's decently close, right? 3-2, but they don't win. Um, the dive synergy, it's there when it can be there, but it's only there when it's easy to be there. Like whenever you get violent on the flank, whenever you get all that stuff. So I'm gonna go with that. He needs to be the best player in the lobby, and the dive synergy is a little off at times, oftentimes. But mostly the Hisu one. Hisu needs to be the best player in the lobby, and that's not. If that's how your team's operating, it's not a viable strategy, right? Not to be actually good. So next up is the LA Valiant. So Valiant's biggest problem was they were doing everything too much. They were doing way too much. They had the weird Zarya comp on New Queen Street. They were subbing people in and out all the time. Just leave India, right? I don't care that you think Easy Han's a better Sojourn. Just leave India, right? There's just too much going on. You had Marvel coming in. You had Saucing coming in. You had every DPS except for Hacker coming in because he's like fake. He's not even real on the DPS. Just way too much. Tone it down a little bit. I think you can still be creative. You can still be all that. Just tone it down. Next is the Washington Justice. So Washington, they didn't even get their prescribed one good match in. Right? Normally they're good for one like solid match where they look good. That didn't happen. Not really. They had a lot of 3-2s, whether it be for them or against them. And they're just way too passive as a team, right? You see, it doesn't matter if they're on Mag, it doesn't matter if it's Kalios, no matter what, it's a passive team. They look best on the Sigma, it's still passive. It's the same thing for Washington. They haven't improved as a team, right? It's the same thing the whole time. You're relying on pure skill pop-off plays. That's it. Just way too passive otherwise. Next, we have the Seoul Dynasty. Now is the Seoul Dynasty. So Seoul just didn't show up to the tournament, right? It's very peculiar. I don't know if they got complacent or something. I don't know if they didn't fully realize they could be out until they actually were losing to Atlanta. But even then, it's like I don't know. It just didn't feel like they fully were aware of the situation. They just didn't come to play. So I'm just gonna go with they got complacent. Legitimately, they did not look like the Seoul Dynasty we're used to. And even in that match going into the tournament where I believe Philly beat them, right? It was Philly, right? Yeah, where Philly beat them. I was like, oh well, that doesn't really matter because they don't really care so much about this game. They care about the tournament, but they just didn't. It was weird. So hopefully that's more of a you have to take everything seriously wake up call for Seoul because there was zero way that they should have been the first team out. And yes, they lose to Atlanta, and that's a good team to lose to. And Spark was also a good team to lose to. But if you're Seoul Dynasty, there should be no good losses, right? There should just be wins. Next is the Hangzhou Sparks. So Sparks' biggest problem was that they met Philly in the losers bracket, and they lost. Because I do think they were the better team overall than Philly, but for some reason, the Philadelphia Fusion are very good against Spark. And yes, they meet them in the upper bracket, and Spark win. Good for them. But after being so close to beating the eventual champions, and then going to losers and losing to Philly, I don't know. There's something about Philly versus Spark that I feel like Philly has the edge just a little bit more. Uh, it's kind of similar to an Atlanta London situation, but not quite as extreme because Spark, as we saw, could beat them in the upper bracket. Next, we have the Houston Outlaws. So, Houston, they're very much ride or die on the Doomfist. If the Doomfist works, they win. If it doesn't work, they lose. But on top of that, this tournament specifically, Pelican struggled a bit against Atlanta, and that was where I thought that they were going to go crazy. I thought that this was it. Pelican really did struggle against Atlanta and the Gladiators, right? Against both of these teams. Um, Pelican struggled, and Pelican cannot struggle. Merritt's very good. No problem with Merritt. He's very strong. He's a great player, but I feel like he needs to be second to Pelican for Houston to actually push themselves as a top team in NA or in the league, right? Uh, and for that reason, I'm gonna say Pelican was not the worst part about Houston, but as for stopping their moving forward, Pelican just didn't step up when he needed to. Um, Going to the Florida Mayhem. So the thing with Florida, they lost their identity from stage to stage, right? They couldn't do the Surmajed on an aggressive place. And because of that, they were kind of floundering. They had someone switching around characters every other fight. He was playing Mystery Heroes. They had XE in over Hydron, which I thought was the wrong play at the time, but I understand you were like, oh, XE has a higher potential, so we're going to get him back to form. Sure, I get that. But then you go into the tournament and you play Hydron to start, and you look like really bad. Like undoubtedly, the worst team of the tournament was Florida, right? For the first game, for the first game and half the next game, right? It was Florida was the worst team in this tournament. You give XE a shot, he starts to look good. Your team's starting to come together. You're figuring out the pieces, but it was just too late. They needed to do this earlier. That's what it comes down to. They didn't get the practice they needed. If they had the practice they needed, if XE was in the whole time, maybe he came back to form earlier. Maybe you have the Rupal backline. I didn't love the Rupal backline, but it works out. So they just had to figure things out earlier, and they would have been better off. Next is going to be the Dallas Fuel. So Dallas, I don't want to put everything on Gurio. It's not all Gurio's fault. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying because Gurio is not to the standard of the rest of the hit scans in the league, or the rest of the top hit scans in the league. Where you're Dallas, you're competing for the top spots. You should be competing for top 4 NA, right? You're the Dallas Fuel. But he's not. He's not anywhere near Kai. He's not anywhere near Kevster or Ons or Podafon, whoever is on the Sojourn at that time, and he's not anywhere near Proper or Kilo, right? Or Sam. Even I would argue even Sam. That is where the core of Dallas's Fuel problems lie. Because of that, I feel like they felt like they had to play the very Winston focused Moira Lucio compositions. That's in an effort to take some pressure off of him, I think. Um, so to me, the root of Dallas's issues was with Gurio. Or if you want to say, oh well, Gurio's getting playtime, so it's on all the DPS, sure, whatever. It's on that DPS that isn't Sparkle. That's the problem. And Gurio's the one playing, so it's on him. If Edison was playing, it'd be on Edison. That's just how it goes. If Doha was playing and this was the issue, it would be on Doha. That's just it. But yeah. So next is Vancouver. I don't even know where to start with Vancouver. They're just skull emoji times 12, times 6, times 15. They've lost Shockwave now. Good that they fired. Deepay did what he could, right? But I have no clue where to even start with this team. They lost to Washington. How could you do this to me, Vancouver? How could you do this to me? Not the scene. Skull emoji. That's all I have for Vancouver. I'm sorry. I cannot think of anything else. This team is skull emoji the team. We need a logo of Vancouver, the Vancouver logo that's just a skull emoji, please. Next is the Paris Eternal. So, thing about Paris is not only do they have consistency issues, right? Even though the score lines don't look like consistency issues, right? You get some maps, you lose some maps, you get some maps, you lose some maps. I guess that is consistency issue, but it's also a skill issue. It's not just a consistency issue. This team, pound for pound, is not matching up to a lot of the league. Let's be honest here. You see Dove and Wub as your DPS line. Are you really expecting more? I'm not expecting more. Dove and Wub, great players, but I feel like they need to complement someone. If they're going to be on a decent roster, there needs to be a complement there. And Paris don't have that complement. It's just a skill issue all around. Uh, from Dawn to Dove Wub, and I would even argue the backline of this season. I am a big Dredger and Khan enjoyer. This season, it hasn't quite been there for anyone on Paris. So yeah, I'm going to go with consistency issues and kind of some skill issues. Next and finally, the San Francisco Shock. And the thing with Shock is they're over reliant on proper, and how could you not be? Every team that has proper would be over reliant on proper. So that's one part. But it's like Proper's just gonna control any team he's on. He's gonna force them to do that just by how sheer good he is. So that's like an aside. That's not really the main problem here. The main problem here for me is that Mikey was playing like 5 out of 6 maps in the grand finals. That's not why you signed Mikey. You did not sign Mikey to play him 5 out of 6 maps in the grand finals. I know you didn't. Or did he? Maybe it was 4. Maybe it was only 4. I don't remember entirely. It was 4 or 5. I'm pretty sure it was. I'm pretty sure it was 5. That's not why you signed Mikey. Mikey is not going to be the starting main tank for a stage title. He isn't, and I don't know why. I don't know why they decided that he would be today, or not today, but in the grand finals. And that is what I'm going to go with as my problem with the Shock. But they're a very good team, right? They're a very good team. Even with Mikey as your starter, they're a good team. I don't think that was the play. But yeah, so comment down below your thoughts if you have any. Like this video if you like it. Subscribe for more daily Overwatch League content. Thank you so much for watching and have yourself a good one. Deuces.